start with number 1 down there, and then 2, and then 3, then 4, then 5. Very good. Yeah, that'll work. Okay, and I wanted to mention to you too, the uniforms that we're wearing are what the Federal Army wore pretty much during the war across the board. The Union Army was pretty standardized. What you saw on the Confederate side was a lot of variation, a lot of differences in things. But the one variation that you'll see in the Federal Army is hat wear, especially west of the Mississippi River. And most of these guys are wearing forage caps. A couple of them actually have kepis on. But this is the hat that you usually think about when you think of a Civil War soldier. You'll notice I'm not wearing a hat like that. The hat I'm wearing is a civilian style hat, but it was very much acceptable for soldiers. Sometimes the enlisted men wore these type of hats too. The one thing about this forage cap is it's got a little short brim on it. It doesn't give you much protection from the sun. It leaves you exposed. All it does is cover your head. That's really all. It doesn't do much else. At least with a brim or something like this, you get a little more protection from the sun and things. So they wore more practical style hats, and that was pretty common across the board. I'm going to go down through the positions here and talk to you a little bit about each one of them, and then we're going to put them back on the gun and discharge it momentarily. The number 1 position, if I get Kent to step forward here, this position is probably the most important and dangerous position on the whole gun. He has a tool in his hand called a sponge rammer staff. You know, the other thing that you need to notice is he has some heavy gloves on, covering his hands to protect him. He's actually up in the front of the cannon when the charge or the projectile, in their case, with the powder would be loaded into the gun. He takes that rammer and shoves it down and loads the cannon with the rammer end of that staff right there. When the gun has been fired, he uses the other end of the staff, which is a sheep's wool sponge that's wrapped around there. It's just some sheep's wool wrapped around the staff there. That we have a water bucket up there, and that water wets that, and then we coat the barrel with a little bit of moisture to kind of kill the sparks and burning embers that might be left from a previous firing. You'll notice the projectiles that they fired, we had a wooden spacer. There would have been a cloth powder bag attached to that, and then there's those metal straps and the actual projectile itself. Sometimes pieces of any of that could get left in the barrel, and if you got something smoldering in there and you put a live round on top of it, that gun's going to go off while you're loading it, which is not very productive in battle. It's sure not very good thing to happen for us out here. So Kenneth is our number 1 man, and he has the very important job of ramming and loading. The number 2 man up here, this is Stephen. Stephen has a worm, what we call the worm, in his hand. It's got a hook on it right there that's kind of squiggly, looks like a coiled snake or a worm. So that's why they call it that. His job is to use that periodically to hook any of that debris that might be left from a previous firing. And then he puts the hook down, and when the gun is being loaded, he actually takes the round after it's brought up from the ammunition box, and he puts it into the barrel so that it can be rammed down by the number 1 position right there. So there's a time when he's holding basically a pound of black powder in his hand, which is a bomb, and if he got shot or got wounded during that time, it could be pretty dangerous for him and the rest of the crew. So we have to protect Stephen up there. He also has the big heavy gloves on in case there is an accident to protect his hands up there. That's the number 2 position. Greg is in our number 3 position right here. On his left thumb, he has a leather glove that only covers the thumb. And what he does is during the loading procedure of the cannon, he covers the vent on the cannon and limits the amount of oxygen that's going inside the barrel. You guys understand that fire needs air. That's one of the 3 triangular things. Fuel is another one. But if there is something burning in the barrel, we're not going to let it be fanned by air moving freely in there. So during the whole loading procedure, he covers that and seals the barrel, makes it a vacuum. And then when the gun is loaded and ready to fire, he uses a brass vent pick, and that goes through the vent to the rear of the cannon, and he pokes a hole in the powder bag so that when we put a cap in there and that spark goes straight onto the powder and discharges the weapon. You've seen that twice now, so you see it's pretty efficient. Okay, so Greg is in our number 3 spot. Jake is our number 4 man today, and he has a belt around his waist, and he has a lanyard with a dowel and a hook on it in his hand right here. This is the trigger for the cannon, basically. And in his pouch there, he has some friction primers. He's going to hand me one right here, and I'm going to show it to you. A friction primer is a brass tube filled with fulminated mercury, and it has a wire that goes into it at an angle right there. And when that wire is pulled through that fulminated mercury, it creates enough heat and friction to discharge the unstable black powder and fulminated mercury material that's inside that tube. That creates a spark, makes a pop like a cap, and that cap goes straight down onto the powder inside the barrel. So this tube is inserted into the vent, the little hole at the back of the cannon that we've been covering to this point, and then his hook is wrapped around this wire right here, and he pulls that at a quick pace, and the gun is discharged from that right there. Before friction primers, they poured loose powder, filled that vent full of loose powder, and touched fire onto it. That's kind of fun or scary, depending on how you look at it. They also used what they called quill primers. They used turkey quills, and they filled them with powder and put them in the barrel, touched that, and it would light the gun that way. But the problem is you got to get fire to light that, and in conditions today, like it's really a lot of moisture in the air, it's been raining, you can't really do that in all weather conditions. These friction primers are pretty much sealed up, and they allow the crews to fight in the rain and in less than ideal dry conditions out there. So that's important to understand. The last guy in the line here has a satchel. This is Jackson. He has a satchel around his shoulder there. He actually brings the ammunition up from the ammunition chest. We haven't been calling for specific ammunitions, and we're going to talk more about the different types of projectiles used here momentarily. But he would have had to listen for the command, figure out what ammunition to bring up out of the chest. Sometimes the sergeant or the gunner would check the ammunition to make sure it was set right and it had the right thing, and then he brings it up from the ammunition chest. This guy sounds like he's got a pretty easy job, but he's carrying a bomb from the ammunition box all the way to the front of that cannon. And usually this is a guy that got shot by snipers and people from long ranges away because they knew he was carrying the ammunition. And he was pretty easy to see because he has a satchel over his shoulder right there. So they know that's the guy that's carrying the ammo right there. Okay, this is Jackson, and he's our ammunition carrier today. The sergeant, who's going to talk to you in a little bit different light momentarily, he's the gunner, and he gave the commands. He watches the crew, he sights the piece and makes sure that the effect of the fire is where it needs to be downrange. So the gunner has a lot of other jobs. He's a sergeant usually, and that's his job. One of the tools that he carries is a sight, a pendulum Haas sight, and there are brackets on the back of the cannon, and then this swings level so that he can line this up, and it's graduated according to distance, and he can get a true aim down that barrel and figure out what he's shooting at. That gun has an effective range. That particular gun is a 3-inch ordnance rifle, and the original version of that gun had a range of about 3 miles. So it's really amazing how accurate that gun truly could be out there. The smooth bores were accurate out to about a mile before that. So artillery is something that changed during the war, and the technology made the battlefield much more deadly. Okay, I'm going to discharge the crew and have them go back to the cannon, and they're going to load and fire one more round for us here. And then we have another talk shortly that will conclude our program. Okay. Cannoneers, post. I'll do this.
I thought this was
Awesome lesson in learning how to fire a cannon. Live oriented was a blank round. These were Union troops that were at the Drennen-Scott house. I think so they paid the Drennen-Scotts for use of the house to the federal troops.
Critical case, 600 yards, 3-second fuse, load.
Try to hold camp steady on during discharge.
Ready. Fire.
Wow. I get a kick every time they shoot that cannon. Being ex-military, I love it. Awesome piece of artillery.
right. Well, my name